right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We are delighted to have everyone here. We're actually very excited to have so many people joining us on our session here. We ran a session just probably 2-3 weeks ago and have had a great time running it. So we will be running these sessions, hopefully, which will be helpful to you moving forward. So without further ado, I'm going to start the session. So hello again and welcome to this session. My name is Nicole. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Conjointly. So today's webinar is about how pricing can make or break your NPD launch. In this session, we will be focusing on the importance of correctly pricing products and to maximize the key metrics for a successful NPD launch. And before I go further, I would like to introduce my colleagues, Nick, who's the director of the company, and Rodrigo, who is the sales manager for LATAM for Conjointly. They will be answering your question at the Q&A little chat box. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to post your question there, and Nick and Rodrigo will be able to help. Okay, so in this session, we will first cover some essential pricing concepts that are relevant to pricing consumer products or consumer packaged goods. Next, we will apply these concepts on a case study about an organic puppy pet food NPD launch, and feel free to send in your questions again using the Q&A feature. So a little bit about me before we go into the session. I have been in market research industry for about 15 years. My journey in research started back in Malaysia. Then I moved to the UK, Australia, and now in the Netherlands. I've worked across the main market research companies, and I have worked in brands across 3 continents in various categories. So to quickly introduce Conjointly, we are an Australian market research company HQ in Sydney, which specializes in automated tools and expert support for product and pricing research. We also have teams in Malaysia, Europe, North America, and South America to service our clients globally. We offer both automated DIY projects as well as custom projects that are fully managed by our team. So we will be reviewing various pricing goals and concepts to explain how they can be applied to your NPD launch. So when setting the price for your NPD, so there are 6 common pricing goals that different companies use to drive their pricing decision. So maximizing profit, which is done by either increasing revenue while keeping costs constant by reducing costs of goods sold. Maximizing revenue, which is done through understanding market demand and adjusting the price so that there is an optimal balance between quantity and price. Maximizing quantity or share, which is very common for early phase startups or on NPD launch scenarios in new categories to gain as many customers as possible, as quickly as possible. Then the 4th, price differentiation. You can also adjust the prices charged for positioning purposes, usually to communicate premiumness. Social fairness. So pricing can be a part of strategy to promote social fairness by making products affordable and accessible. And finally, it can also be the result of another force in play. So there are a number of strategies that you could use to achieve these goals. Here we will quickly touch on some of the common ones. So the first one, dynamic pricing, where you would actively change prices so that the price is also optimal for the goal of the firm. Freemium pricing, where you have a free tier to induce trial, and then a premium tier for the full offering. High-low pricing, where you would be setting a high base price for a product so it can be lowered for sales or promotions in the future. Price skimming, similar to high-low, it is setting a high price when launching a product so that it can slowly be reduced over time. Tailored pricing, setting prices on a case-by-case basis depending on the customer. And finally, fixed pricing, the most simple pricing strategy, offering one price and sticking with it. So next we will talk about marginal willingness to pay. So marginal willingness to pay is a very important metric when we are trying to understand the value that customers associate to a product or a feature. It is the indicative amount of money your customers are willing to pay for features of your product. Accurately estimating marginal willingness to pay for a product is the critical success factor that will determine successful market performance. For traditional market research, marginal willingness to pay can be found through choice-based conjoint, which the willingness to pay is derived from several trade-off exercises. While there is no direct financial consequence to consumer decisions, due to the emergence of agile research tools, choice-based conjoint exercise can be executed with relatively ease. So next slide, we talk about price elasticity of demand, which is short for PED. It is a measure of how a quantity demanded is affected by a change in price. This is extremely important when launching an NPD, as it explains how sensitive consumers are to any change in the price of your product. While this formula might look daunting, it really is not. So simply put, it is the percentage change in quantity demanded for a product divided by the percentage change in price. So there are 4 typical cases to consider. So the first one, demand is price elastic, so PED is less than -1. This is when an increase in the price of a product results in a proportionately larger reduction in demand. You need to be very careful in changing prices for an elastic good. So the second one, demand is unit elastic, so PED is around -1. This is when an increase in the price of a product results in an exactly proportional change in price. And thirdly, demand is price inelastic, so PED is between -1 and 0. Here, an increase in prices results in a proportionately smaller drop in volume. This allows you to increase your price while not significantly reducing market share. And then finally, PED is positive, so PED is greater than 0. So this is quite an unusual scenario where an increase in price actually results in an increase in demand due to price quality inference. So for example, this would be the luxury watch market, where a high price may be a signal of quality, resulting in increased demand. Next, as we learned from the previous 4 scenarios, the elasticity of your NP really heavily influences the price that you should set. So it is absolutely vital to know how the market will react to you adjusting the price of your product and how it will impact total sales. So to calculate PED for multiple products, there are a number of research methods you could use. The 3 methods are generic conjoint, brand-specific conjoint, as well as Gabor-Granger. So these are the most commonly used method to answer questions surrounding PED. So to quickly recap, marginal willingness to pay can help you understand the average amount consumers are willing to pay to upgrade from feature A to feature B. It is simple and easy to understand dollar value estimate that can be used when comparing between ingredients or the benefit of a product. While marginal willingness to pay is a theoretically sound metric, it needs practical validation before implementation of the recommended price. The PED, on the other hand, helps you answer questions surrounding optimal pricing for your product that maximizes revenue or volume or profit. Ultimately, both can help you perfect your NPD launch. So now that we have covered the basic concepts on pricing, I will be discussing a pet food NPD launch case study conducted with our brand price trade-off. Now, I would like to take you through a case study that we have prepared. So firstly, the background of the case study is that BrandCo is a global pet food manufacturer based in California, USA. BrandCo's strategy team approached conjointly looking for help to launch their new product, organic puppy pet food, into the American market. So conjointly helped to identify the research question, most importantly to BrandCo's product launch. So the research questions are, what new product pricing will maximize BrandCo's revenue, gross margin and share? What is the psychologically acceptable range of prices for the new organic product versus other pet food products? How much preference share would the NPD gain, and which competitors would it take preference share from? So to answer their research question, BrandCo and conjointly worked together to set up a brand price trade-off experiment. So an important first step in setting up any conjoint study is having a clear understanding of the market your NPD is going to launch into. So BrandCo recognized that their dry pet food products is much more likely to compete with other dry pet food products rather than wet pet food products. BrandCo also realized that whilst they are launching an organic product, their main competition will be non-organic competitors. So it is vital that they are included in their competitive set. So using this information, BrandCo and conjointly found 18 dry dog food competitors that comprise roughly 80% of the market share. So the next slide, we talk about the survey flow. Both parties agreed that the BPTO is the best methodology for this survey because it gives context to an NPD launch through projecting revenue, profit, and market volume. It identifies where the NPD will source volume from and show the effect of awareness and advertising of the NPD. Here we can see the survey flow of BrandCo's BPTO. So firstly, conjoint exercises were given to respondent, which asked respondent to select their preferred product out of the market current offerings. Both price and weight of the products are made clear to respondents, ensuring that they are making an informed decision. Next, respondents were given the same questions, but with the NPD included as an option. So after a few questions, the respondent will be shown an excerpt, which is this over here, of the new NPD. This is to familiarize them with the product. And then respondents will then ask a final series of questions, which again include the NPD. So once data collection was completed, conjointly's online tools were used to automatically analyze the data. So preference shares, which is the back dotted line found at each of the 8 price points tested. As expected, preference share was maximized at the lowest price point tested at $28.12, which is here. That said, the plot of preference shares is relatively flat with an inelastic price elasticity of demand of minus 0.5, which is here. Tying this back to what we have learned about elasticity, this is telling us that the price, when the price increases, there is a proportionally smaller drop in demand. So our revenue and gross margin were both found to be maximized at the $50 mark, which was the higher price point tested. This didn't surprise BrandCo, as they had already found out there's an inelastic demand for their product, which suggests that higher prices will maximize their revenue and profit. So importantly, they were able to find the price breaking point for their product. This is where any price lower than this will not result in a profit due to underpricing failure. This price was approximately $33, which is this line over here. So BrandCo now knows that this is the minimum price they need to set to turn a profit. Often, overpricing failure can be a cause of concern where a price too high results in an NPD not being profitable due to low preference shares. Out of all the price points tested, none were approaching overpricing failure due to NPD's inelastic demand. So in the scenario where BrandCo maximizes both revenue and profit by setting their price to $50, they know that they will result in preference shares of 23%. So, but where does the preference share comes from? So, source of business. So here we see the source of business for the NPD. At the revenue maximizing price, BrandCo is expecting to gain about 23% of market share, of preference share. So where did it come from? So the pedigree will see a 9% reduction in their preference share, and followed by Purina, which will see a reduction of 2%. The remaining 12% of market share is taken from various competition throughout the market. So the source of business is extremely important when a brand has pre-existing product in the market. For example, if BrandCo had already launched a vegan puppy food, their new organic food could steal some of that market share. So by estimating the source of business, it helps to protect your brand from cannibalization during NPD. Another very useful output from the BPTO is the Van Westendorp analysis. So to help determine the acceptable range of prices for a product or service, on the chart, the red line shows the minimum acceptable price and the green line shows the maximum acceptable price. So for our NPD, the range of acceptable prices is between about $25 to $47. As you can see, there's a little yellow diamond here, which is our revenue maximizing price, sitting just above the acceptable price range, indicating that $50 price point is very slightly above the acceptable range. It is also notable that our NPD has a very large range of acceptable prices. This again supports the inelastic PED that we found, suggesting that customers are relatively insensitive to the pricing of our NPD. On the graph, you can also see the blue squares that shows actual price points of the product. As expected, the premium products had prices significantly higher than the maximum acceptable price, while the other brands' prices were relatively consistent. So now that we have gone through the case study, we will quickly go through how BrandCo used simulation to gather information that they needed to answer their research questions. So I'll just need to come out from this PowerPoint. Okay, so this is our very cool simulator. Okay, so here we see the baseline for the puppy pet food within the simulator, including all competition within the market. So on the left-hand side, we see preference shares of various brands, and on the right-hand side, we see revenue projections. So down here, we can see each of the market competitors, each with an adjustable price. To make the simulation easier to view, they have been color-coded by brand. So as you can see here, purple for Pedigree, pink for Purina, and so on and so forth. Here again, we see the baseline, but this time, let me go back to the top. But this time we have two more scenarios included, including the NPD into the market before and after showing the AdSep shown by the red bars over here. So as you can see, before showing the AdSep, the NPD has a preference share of around 5%, but after showing the AdSep, the NPD has a preference share of 23%. The reason for that is actually this is quite a typical result for launching an NPD, as without the AdSep, consumers are cautious to purchase the NPD as they don't really have any knowledge about the product. So from here on, we will focus on including the AdSep as the more realistic result. So on the right-hand side, we see projected revenue for each product. So conjointly allows you to easily customize your revenue calculations, and this is how you can do it. Click here, and we scroll all the way down here. So for our NPD, we calculated the revenue through market share times price times 1,000, as we assume a market index of 1,000 products total. So in the next tab, in this tab, we can see NPD sensitivity to price changes. For each of the 8 price points tested, the left-hand side shows the preference share for all competition, but as BrandCo is more focused on their own performance at different price point, we will hide this for now. So we will look at this tab here. So we have the same chart here as the previous tab, but we have now hidden all the competitors to make it easier for you to read. For the preference shares on the left-hand side, we see preference is maximized at the lowest price point and minimized at the highest price point. But how can you easily calculate PED? On conjointly, it's really easy. So simply click on 2 price points. For example, if we click on the minimal price point versus the maximum price point, you can see that we have an inelastic demand of minus 0.4. So this can also be done for any 2 price points within the chart. So let's say if you click on $30, $30 and $35, the example, this shows us the demand between $30 to $35 is minus 0.8. And on the right-hand side, we see BrandCo's revenue projections for the NPD. So the revenue consistently rises as price increase. Going back to the graph we showed you earlier, you may remember there was a third line on the graph, which is profit. So how can profit be calculated on conjointly? Again, it's very easy using our tool. So on the left-hand side, we have the same preference share chart as before, but on the right-hand side, we now see profit rather than revenue. Here we can see the first three price point result in net loss due to underpricing failure, while the breakpoint appears to be around the $33 price point. And here we can show how profit projections were calculated. So again, all competing products were set to 0 because they are not relevant to BrandCo at this point. So we will just click here to look at this. So we will scroll down here. So BrandCo estimated that organic pet food would cost $3 per kilo to produce, as their NPD is a 10-kilo bags. This gives a total variable cost of $30 per bag, shown here in the formula. BrandCo also knew that there are fixed costs involved in producing their NPD, which is estimated as $1,000. As we can see, the profit tells a very different story to revenue, with the importance of setting a higher price to cover the costs involved. So then now this is quite a familiar chart that we've seen in the PowerPoint earlier. So going back to the source of business, we can see earlier out of the 23% preference shares gained by our NPD, 9% is from Pedigree and 2% from Purina. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but it was when we put it in the PowerPoint chart is very visible. So the last thing that I want to touch on in the simulator is the Van Basten in the Insights tab. So finally, we will go over how the Van Basten dot chart was created. So during the survey, respondents were randomly shown some products being tested, including our NPD. They were then asked to submit multiple prices where they would consider, consider the product questionably cheap, good value for money, third, expensive, and finally, too expensive. So the results can be seen in the Van Basten dot column over here. Here we see acceptable price range for each of the product over here. And for our NPD, we can see that anywhere between $25 to $47.33 is within the acceptable price range. So neither being too expensive nor so cheap as to suggest inferior quality. So let me bring back the PowerPoint charts. So now that we have discussed the outputs and the setup of pricing studies, we would like to spend a little bit more time on the finer details of setting up and using pricing conjoints. These tips that you see on the slides are based on our experience, and there are three groups. So firstly, we would like to talk about the sample definition. So it is quite a common mistake to get sample without quotas. It is important to have representativeness, particularly by household income and by brand usage. Gender and age is a little bit less relevant to pricing studies, but they can be helpful if you want to balance sample. The other thing to be mindful of is not sample only buyers or considerers of specific brands. Usually this type of sampling will lead to an underestimation of price elasticity of demand. And the next set of tips that we want to mention is about setting up the survey itself. It is important to size image proportionately to the actual pack size that people see in the market. So when they see the survey, they can tell the bigger pack size is big and the smaller pack size is small. And second, it's important to keep track of the quality of the images. We shouldn't have any grainy images, and if they have to have grainy images, maybe it's even better sometimes to have grainy images across the board, because it's only natural for the respondents to gravitate towards images or pack shots which have better quality. So this is especially concerning if there are a lot of respondents using mobile screens where there is retina display. So our suggestion is to use the conjointly image optimization tool to help overcome those kind of issues. So the next suggestion is not to have more than 5 options per screen. Some conjoint platforms allow you to do more, that's fine, but we do have concerns about quality of responses when it comes to giving people more than 5 choices. Lastly, there is sometimes temptation to do virtual shelf just by studies, which are excellent in their own rights for certain purposes, but we have not seen really any evidence in literature or in our own practice that this type of studies help predict market outcomes better than simple conjoint. So it definitely costs more. And our suggestion is that in general case, opt for the simpler, more cost-efficient conjoint rather than shelf display. And finally, we would like to talk about working with output. So one great thing that we've shown on this slide is the simulations and the tools that give you those charts and prediction. And that tool is called a simulator. So if you never use a proper nice simulator, definitely go log on to our platform, Conjointly platform. We have plenty of examples there, and our tools allow you to do what if scenarios, price elasticity, comparison between subgroups, and all those things are very useful to play with and get a feel of the data and what kind of predictions you get out of it. It is possible to do market share adjustments. It works particularly well if you have a limited number of SKUs. If you have got a large number of SKUs, even more than a dozen, you will end up with more difficult and imprecise adjustments that makes matching to the market a bit more difficult. But again, technically, it is possible. It is also possible to analyze promo mechanics in conjoint. Especially this year, we have had a few studies that looked at promo mechanics. Maybe that's something to do with the pandemic. Maybe it's just people realizing the power of conjoints and trying to get more value from them. So one caveat with that is that definitely a bit more elaborate and typically not something that you can do directly out of the box. So various promo mechanics work differently. There are volumetric promo mechanics such as buy 3 for 2, buy 1 get a second one for half price. Those are a little bit difficult to predict using standard conjoint methods, and that's why they require further analysis. For example, looking at simulations of scenarios with different promo mechanics across different weeks, and that is an extra bit of complexity to wrestle with. But again, it is possible through conjoint methods. So to wrap up, here is a summary of the key takeaways for your next NPD launch. To recap, first, you would have to set clear pricing goals and develop relevant pricing strategies to achieve those goals. Next, we will have to apply concepts such as marginal willingness to pay and price elasticity of demand to align consumers' preferences to relevant business metrics. Lastly, using the correct research approach to simulate your launch scenarios and confirm your go-to market strategy for a successful NPD launch. So if you have any questions surrounding launching new products or other inquiries, please feel free to reach out to me at nicole.teh@conjointly.com. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you. And now we will have a look at see if there's any questions that's unanswered.